Hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues, a retrospective series where I talk about my favorite DC comics of the past that are still affordably available today, blabbing about why they are special to me and what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, this series does freely contain spoilers, but I think even spoiled, the stories I feature are still well worth reading. We've entered now into the New 52 era of DC Comics, which I had some significant complaints about, and yet in going back, I've discovered some great stories that I think are well worth reading. Batman: The Court of Owls introduced one of the most striking new Batman villains in decades, largely because the court is not a single person, but a shadowy organization whose members are anonymous, and the organizational structure is something of a mystery, meaning that unlike other villains, Batman can't simply win by defeating an evil mastermind and sending them to jail or Arkham Asylum. On top of that, the Court of Owls has been active in Gotham for longer than Bruce Wayne has even been alive, despite the fact that he never knew they existed. This makes them really a humbling opponent for Batman, who is not only the world's greatest detective in DC Comics, but also strongly ties his identity to Gotham City. So the discovery of the Court of Owls humbles, shakes, and even breaks Batman on multiple levels. They became an instant legend and fan favorite of the Batman mythos. We will take a look at this entire 11-issue storyline in two parts. It's organized in various ways in trade paperbacks and on DC Universe Infinite. Some of them just kind of label issues 1 through 7 as the Court of Owls, and then like issues 8 through something as Night of the Owls or whatever. But issue 11 on the cover clearly says like this is the finale of the Court of Owls story. So I don't know why they organize it differently in trade paperbacks and on DC Universe Infinite. But the whole storyline of the Court of Owls I consider to be issues 1 through 11. But this time we're going to look at just issues 1 through 6. The DC Database synopsis for issue 1 reads, Batman puts down an insurrection at Arkham Asylum when one of the guards is paid to release the inmates. Returning to his public life, Bruce Wayne unveils his massive new development plans to bring Gotham City into the future. Harvey Bullock discovers a tortured murder victim pinned to the wall of his apartment with numerous knives bearing an owl insignia. They find a hidden message on the wall saying that Bruce Wayne will die tomorrow. And Batman finds Dick Grayson's DNA under the victim's fingernails. This issue really reminds us of the status quo in both Bruce Wayne's and Batman's relationship to Gotham, and then presents a threat to both. Bruce Wayne is left a death threat, and even more shockingly, Dick Grayson's DNA is found under the fingernails of a murder victim at a crime scene with the kind of brutal imagery you'd expect from an R-rated crime drama. Of course, we naturally assume there is some explanation, and yet a threat to Bruce Wayne and Dick's DNA evidence in play hit very close to home and make us wonder if the person behind this crime might know Bruce Wayne's identity. I think it's a great setup for the story and already leaves Batman seeming exposed and at a disadvantage. The DC Database synopsis for issue 2 reads, his autopsy alongside Commissioner Gordon reveals a possible connection to the Court of Owls, an urban legend taken from a nursery rhyme. Nightwing explains that the man grabbed him and tried to warn him at an earlier public appearance. Bruce Wayne is attacked by a deadly assassin known as the Talon during a meeting with politician Lincoln March. They grapple out of a window at the top of Wayne Tower, which Bruce Wayne survives while the killer plummets into a car. Pronounced dead, he later reawakens in the ambulance and walks free after murdering the emergency medical team. This issue continues establishing Bruce Wayne's connection to and knowledge of Gotham. In issue 1, it's mentioned that alongside his plans to rebuild derelict parts of Gotham, he will also be covertly building bat bunkers throughout the city from which he and his allies can operate. In this issue, we see him make use of a newly installed camera and scanning device in the city morgue that allows him to remotely interact with Jim Gordon as the victim's body is being examined, and to do his own examination as well. And in both the opening and climactic moments of the issue, Bruce Wayne's text box narration reflects on the architecture of the original Wayne Tower, knowledge which actually saves his life from a lethal fall after an assassination attempt by an assassin garbed with a creepy owl motif. And yet all these rightful claims to knowledge and connection with Gotham are subverted as the readers realize even before Batman that he is completely wrong to dismiss the existence of the legendary Court of Owls. It seems it is very real and very much a present and increasingly looming threat. The DC Database synopsis for issue 3 reads, Alfred Pennyworth recalls the story of Alan Wayne, Bruce's great-great-grandfather, who went mad and died raving that owls were out to get him. March is hospitalized, but insists that he will continue his mayoral bid despite warnings from the owls. Investigating every building in the last century by the Alan Wayne Trust, Batman discovers a series of the Talon's hidden bases containing pictures of the court. When he arrives at the most recent, Talon watches on as the building explodes. As this story continues to build on the surprising things Batman doesn't know about his city and its history, I feel an almost Lovecraftian sense of dread as he explores various hidden nests of the Court of Owls with old creepy pictures showing people in blank-faced owl masks in fancy evening attire. It gives off culty vibes and feeds an unsettling fear of the unknown for me. I love it. The mood set by this story and its artwork, dominated by browns and grays, is a great combo of grounded and eerie as far as I'm concerned. Although I have to say I'm not a fan of the tripwire explosion Batman triggers at the end. They never justify this, and it wouldn't have taken much. Batman would understandably be off his game with all he's discovering, but they don't show that he's emotionally thrown off. He just seems to be in his usual detective mode when for some reason he triggers one of the oldest traps in the book to give us a cliffhanger ending where he seems to blow up. The DC Database synopsis for issue 4 reads, Escaping the burning building, he returns to the Batcave. Bruce performs an autopsy on Alan Wayne and determines that he was tortured to death in a similar manner to the earlier murder victim. Nightwing asks why he refuses to believe that the court might be real, and Bruce recounts a story from his childhood. Following the death of his parents at the hands of Joe Chill, he spent months investigating a possible connection to the court. Allowing his emotional need for a conspiracy to get in the way of the case almost destroyed him, and all subsequent attempts have turned up no evidence. Returning to the sewer where Alan Wayne's body was found, the Talon takes him by surprise and abducts him. He wakes up in a giant labyrinth and is welcomed by the Court of Owls. The most striking moment to me in this issue is after Bruce tells Dick about how he had investigated the court, searching for their existence as a child, blaming them for his parents' death, only to get himself in danger and barely survive with a valuable lesson. Never let your emotions guide you on a case, which he clearly made a value in his crime-fighting career and in all subsequent times in his life as he has investigated the Court of Owls. But at this point, as readers, unless we're being tricked by the writer, we know that the court is real. And so what are we supposed to make of this moment? It's certainly true that emotions should not guide us in a search for the truth about anything. Maybe they can motivate the search in some way, but they shouldn't be shaping our conclusions at all. That's right that Bruce comes to that conclusion and makes that a value. And yet declaring that mantra doesn't keep Bruce from seemingly denying what to us as readers is a very obvious truth. I think this demonstrates how complex and hidden our emotions can really be. It seems to me that although Bruce claims he is refusing to be led by emotion, it seems that he actually still is led by emotion when it comes to the Court of Owls. Pride, maybe? It could be that some of his identity is wrapped up in how capable he is in his work. He is undoubtedly driven by the emotion of his tragic past to be the best crime fighter he can be. We see that in tons of Batman stories. So pride may be grown out of that, or survivor's guilt, may not allow him to believe that he could have been so wrong for so long about the court, even in the face of new and very compelling evidence. I think it's a good springboard moment for us to remember as we try to control our emotions, to continually probe our thoughts and feelings deeper and repeatedly, since even as we may commit to not being led by our emotions, the very things we do to commit to that value may be affected and tainted by hidden emotions we haven't recognized or acknowledged yet. The DC database synopsis for issue 5 reads, "Trapped inside the giant maze, he spends over a week with no food, slowly going insane to the point of hallucination. The labyrinth has been in use for decades. Words and pictures on the wall tell stories of all the men and women they've killed with it over the years. Breaking through a panel in the floor, he drops into a room that tells his own story. The Talon walks up from behind and stabs him in the gut." This issue is all about bringing Batman to his lowest point against the Court of Owls. He's been trapped underground in their labyrinth below Gotham for 8 days, with only the drugged water they provide to keep him alive. He's hallucinating for much of the issue, imagining seeing his parents as old and having been trapped in the labyrinth since he thought they were killed as a boy. The panels turn sideways and eventually upside down, intending to bring the reader into the feeling of insanity. Reading the physical issue, I just rotated the book in my hands, but now I prefer to read using the DC Universe Infinite service on my desktop PC monitor, which I can't rotate. I thought it would be actually more annoying than it was, though. But it turns out that actually being forced to read upside down really did give me a trippy experience. And the story beats and words aren't important, I don't think, if you don't have the patience either. The main intention of disorientation is felt even without trying to read. I mean, maybe even more so since you'll know you're kind of missing some bits, but none of it is plot crucial, largely hallucinations, until the end when Batman looks horribly and fatally stabbed from behind. It's the second time an issue has ended feeling like a trick to me. Like the tripwire explosion, this stabbing from behind looks even more impossible to survive. I get why they did it, but I tend to kind of check out and recognize it as a dramatic comic book device, and one that feels a little cheap to me. Even so, I have to say the ability to create mood in these creators of this story continues to propel me through every one of these issues. The DC database synopsis for issue 6 reads, "Broken and bleeding, they decide to honor him by leaving his bones on display in the labyrinth as a tribute to a worthy enemy. Talon lets the court decide how to dispose of him, and they order more pain. Batman receives a brutal beating and almost accepts death until a picture of the tortured Alan Wayne spurs him on. His last reserves of strength tear the owls off of him, and he savagely takes the Talon down before knocking him out. Determining that they must be near the river, he rigs a makeshift explosion and escapes into the water. The oldest owl has her men dispose of the failed Talon and reveals that she has an army more of them to release. With all the foreboding mood that the threat of the unknown Court of Owls creates in this story, I don't know how this part of the arc could live up to that and end in a more satisfying way than it does. I think it probably could have ended in a more satisfying way than it does, and I wish it would have, but I can't honestly say I know how they could have done that. Basically, it feels to me like many episodes of the 90s Superman animated series where the villain of the week, no matter who they were, could trounce Superman pretty good for the first 2/3 of the episode, and then Superman just becomes more determined at some point and is then able to push through what floored him in the last scene and take down the villain. Similarly, when Batman seems utterly defeated with no strength left, a painting of his ancestor Alan Wayne emboldens him to really just try a lot harder. What keeps it from feeling too cheap to me, though, is how battered and beaten Batman is, even as he manages to drag himself away at the end. He barely survives his encounter, his face-to-face encounter with the Court of Owls, and they are still a seemingly insurmountable threat, especially when the final panel shows that they have an army of near unstoppable talons to unleash on Gotham. It fittingly leaves me again with the feeling that the Court of Owls really is the most worthy new adversary for Batman in decades. Batman, of course, does vow to take them all down, but we'll have to wait and see how he hopes to pull that off next time when we look at Part 2 of Batman, the Court of Owls. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.